Okay, in today's lesson, which is 7.2, basically you will be able to use the converse of the Pythagorean theorem to determine if a triangle is a right triangle. So in the previous lesson, we basically did the Pythagorean theorem, stating if you know that c squared equals a squared plus b squared, then you know that you have a right triangle, okay? Now here, though, we're going to do the converse. Basically, this is saying if the square of the length of the longest side of a triangle is equal to the sum of the squares of the lengths of the other two sides, then the triangle is a, we're going to say, right triangle. There we go. So with our previous, we already knew the triangle was a right triangle, but this time now we have to prove that it is a right triangle. So basically all of this wording here just means if we already know that the c squared, remember c is what we would call your hypotenuse, okay? So if we know our hypotenuse squared equals both of our legs squared and they're added together and they equal each other, then we know that triangle ABC is going to be a right triangle. There we go. And remember, with our triangles, your C is always across from the 90 degree. That's why we call the hypotenuse. And A is going to be one of your legs. And then B is also going to be another leg. So now what we're going to do is use this theorem to determine whether the given triangle is a right triangle. So we have to verify that these are right triangles, okay? So what we need to do is we have three sides. Now we have to label these sides A, B, and C. Now in order to label this, remember C is your hypotenuse, and your hypotenuse is always your longest side. So if you don't know that, make sure you write that down. So your hypotenuse is always the largest side. Now here we have 6, 9, and then 3 times the square root of 13, okay? So in this case, we might have to calculate what 3 times the square root of 13 is to see if this number is maybe larger than 9. To do this, we're going to just use our calculator. So I'm going to do 3 times, and I'm going to put my square root of 13 in parentheses. So I do parentheses, second, the x squared button, okay? And then I put the number 13 here. I have to arrow out, so make sure you write arrow out if you have to, and then in parentheses. And let's go ahead and calculate it. So we get about approximately 10.8. So really this 13 times square root of, 3 times square root of 13 is approximately 10.8. So if we look at all our sides, well, 10.8 is the largest number. So we can say that 3 times the square root of 13 is our C. And that means our 6 and 9, these are our legs. Now remember with our legs, it does not matter which one you label A and which one you label B. So just label one of them A and one of them B. So now using our theorem, so the C squared equals A squared, we are now going to see if our hypotenuse squared equals our leg squared and when they add them. Now here, because I don't know if actually C squared equals A squared plus B squared, I'm going to put a question mark here because we're trying to figure if this is true. So now what I'm doing is put the C squared, so remember C in this case is our 3 times square root of 13. So now I'm going to square that. Equals, now I do A squared, we said A was 6, so I have 6 squared, plus our B squared. In this case, it's going to be the 9. Now once again, I have to put that question mark on top of my equal symbol because I don't know if they are equal, our two sides are equal. Now here we have 3 times the square root of 13. So let's go ahead, let's plug this into our calculator and see what we get, okay? So I'm going to put in parentheses 3, and then let's do square root. So remember, second x squared of 13. I got a right arrow out of it. in parentheses. Now I press the x squared button because I do want to square that entire phrase. And then here I get 117. So 3 times the square root of 13 squared gives us 117 equals, well, 6 squared equals 36. And 9 squared is 81. Now remember, I still have to put that question mark on top because I don't know if it's actually equal to it. Okay? So now my last part here is I'm going to see if I add 36 and 81, do I get 117? Well, if you do, you should get 117. So because 117 does equal 117, this is what we call a true statement. Then we say yes. The triangle is a right triangle. So I'm going to write right. And then I'm just going to draw a triangle to indicate that. Okay. Now I want to go kind of back to this 3 times the square root of 13 because you might not understand what happened here. So with this, I basically just did 3 squared, which gives us 9. And remember, the square root and the square cancel each other out. So I'm left with this 13. So I'm basically just doing 9 times 13 to get 117. If you kind of still have more questions on how to get this, you can email me, you can ask in class, or come in before or after school to ask more about this. So now what I would like you to do is try B. So you need to figure out, is this triangle right here that we see is a right triangle? And you're going to use the same way that I did in part A. So go ahead and pause the video and try this one out. So hopefully you've paused the video. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you my work on this one. And then I would just say pause the video to see if you got the correct answer and if your work is correct. So as you can see, once again, I wrote c squared equals a squared plus b squared. And I did put that question mark on top of the equal symbol because I don't know if they're actually equal. Now go ahead and pause this if you need to kind of look at my work to see how you did. Now if you look at the bottom here, as you can see, when we did 29 squared, we got 841. And then when we did our 24 squared plus 16 squared, we got 832. Now if you're asking why is 29 C, because 29 is our biggest value, and C, which is our hypotenuse, is always the biggest value, meaning 24 is a lake, so that could be A, and then 16 is also a lake, so I made it B. Okay, if you have any other questions on Part B, make sure you email me or come in before or after school to ask your questions. So now we're going to get on to the next part of our notes. This is classifying a triangle by angles using its side lengths. Okay, so we have 3 different theorems. So it's saying if we know that c squared, our hypotenuse, is equal to a squared plus b squared, then we definitely know that the angle C, the measure of angle C, is 90. And so this means triangle ABC is what we call a right triangle. Because remember, right triangles have 90 degrees. Now let's say you're calculating c squared as along with a squared plus b squared. Let's say when you do c squared, it's actually less than a squared plus b squared. When this occurs, then our measure of angle C, which is right here, is actually less than 90 degrees. And remember from some of the geometry vocabulary, anything that's less than 90 degrees of an angle, we call that acute. So that means that our triangle ABC is called an acute triangle. Now let's say your c squared is greater than your a squared plus b squared. What has happened there? Then the measure of angle C is actually greater than 90. And so remember, any angle that's greater than 90, that means it's called an obtuse angle. So therefore, our triangle ABC would be actually an obtuse triangle. Okay. So now what we're going to do is use these 3 methods to classify what our triangles are. So if we go to our example 2, in our first one, what we're basically doing is classing each triangle either as acute, right, or obtuse. And you have to use one of these theorems in order to show that. So here for 1, we are going to use that c squared equals a squared plus b squared, okay? Now, in this case, we usually would say, oh, it's equal. But because we have to classify what our triangle is, we don't exactly know c squared equals that. So what I'm going to do is create a box, okay, in between and put a question mark there. Because what I want to know is, are c squared equal to it? Is it greater than? Or is it less than? So now what we need to do is plug values in for c, a, and b. Remember, c is always your largest value. So I'm going to put that. So c is always the largest value out of the 3 numbers given to you. So if we look at number 1, we have 10.5, 37.5, and 36. Now if you look at all three of these, all you have to say is which one's the biggest. Well, 37.5 would be the biggest. So we're going to say that's our c value. Now the other 2 are just basically your legs, so you can classify them as whatever you want. I'm just going to put my 10.5 as A, and 36 is going to be B. But you can always switch that. Okay, so c squared, so we're going to do 37.5 squared. Once again, I'm going to do the box with a question mark, because I don't know if it's going to be greater than, less than, or equal to our a squared, which I made it as 10.5. So I did 10.5 squared, then plus our b, which is 36, so 36 squared. So now what I'm going to do is calculate 37.5 squared. You can just do this in your calculator. All you would have to do is do 37.5, and then that x squared button, and then press enter. So we get 1406.25. So I'm going to write that down. So we get 1406.25. Once again, the box with the question mark. Now I do 10.5. Now go ahead and plug that in the calculator, or you can just go onto Google and then ask for what would 10.5 square be. We should get 110.25. And then lastly, 36 squared should be about 1,296. Okay, so now in this case, with my a squared and b squared, I'm going to add them together and see what I get. So I'm going to leave this area right here blank to see what I'm going to get. So when we add these 2 numbers, we should get about 1,406.25. Now if we look at these 2 numbers, we can see they're actually equal to each other. So we would actually in the middle put an equal symbol. Now if we go back to our theorems, right? If we said our c squared does equal a squared plus b squared, we said then our triangle is a right triangle. So now classifying this triangle here, we're going to write it is a right triangle. So I'm going to put the word right, and then I'm going to be just a tiny bit lazy and just put a triangle symbol to indicate that's a triangle. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do number 2. We're going to do exactly the same thing that we did in number 1. So I'm going to rewrite my c squared, and then I'm going to put the box with the question mark because I don't know what's going to happen. Now, what we need to do is label our a, b, and c. Remember, c is always the largest number. So let's look at our 3. We have 12.3, 15.2, and then 23.5. Well, if you notice here, 23.5 is our largest number. So that means the other 2 are our legs. So we just label one of them A and the other one B. So now what we're going to do is do 23.5 squared. I'm going to put the box with the question mark here. And my A squared is the 12.3, so I do 12.3 squared. Plus, now I do my B squared, which was 15.2. So I do 15.2 squared. Now, in my calculator, I'm going to put 23.5 squared. And when you calculate that, you should get about 552.25. Once again, I'm going to have the box with the question mark. Now, 12.3 squared, that should give us about 151.29. And then plus our 15 squared, which is going to be 231.04. So now I'm going to rewrite my 552.25. I'm going to leave the middle blank because what I'm going to do is add these two terms over here. And when I do, I get 382.33. I'm going to rewrite this 3, kind of look a little bit better. So 382. Now our C is over here. If we look, well, this number is bigger than 382. So we would say 552.25 is greater than 382.33. And if we go back into our theorem, if our C squared is bigger, that means we actually have what is called the obtuse triangle. So our answer here is that we're actually going to have an obtuse triangle. Now, if you have any questions on examples 1 and 2, once again, make sure you email me or come in before or after school or ask during class. Okay. Now, what I would like you to do is pause the video and try number 3 and number 4 on your own. Okay, make sure that you pause the video. So what I'm going to do is kind of help you label these. So if we look at number 3, our 3 values are 23, 25.2, and 18. Well, as we can see, 25.2 is our biggest number, so that's C. The other 2 is going to be our legs, so we'll label them A and B. Now what I'm going to do is kind of just show you the answer that I received on this one. And I would suggest maybe pausing the video to see what your answer is. So once again, I did that C squared and then a rectangle with our question mark with A squared plus B squared because I don't know what's happening. Now if you look all the way towards the end, once we calculate everything, our C squared is less than our A squared plus B squared. When that happens, our final answer would actually be called an acute triangle. Okay, so now on the other one, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to label our A, B, and C. Remember, C is the largest value. Well, if we look at our 3 values, 27 is the biggest. So I'm just going to label number 8 as A and then 21 as B. Once again, here's the answers. So make sure you kind of look at your answers compared to what I did here. And as you can see at the end, our C squared is larger than our A squared plus B squared. So that means we have an obtuse triangle. And if you always forget when you use acute triangle, when you use obtuse, always go back to those 3 theorems. They will help you out. So make sure if you have any questions on any parts of these notes that you come in before or after school, you can ask during class or email me.